They say every school hides secrets, forgotten staircases, sealed off corridors, empty rooms no longer spoken of. But what if the school itself remembers? At Jefferson High School, an aging institution tucked into a quiet Illinois suburb, a rumor has passed from student to student for decades. The existence of a 13th classroom. It's not listed on the official floor plans. No teacher has ever claimed it. No student is assigned to it. Yet some swear they've seen eyes at the end of a hallway that shouldn't exist, down a stairwell that appears only when you're alone. Those who've entered describe the same thing. Dusty wooden desks, a blackboard with lessons from the 1950s, a clock ticking but never moving, cold air, though there are no vents. They say it feels like stepping into a moment trapped in Ambera classroom that doesn't age, doesn't change, and doesn't want to be found again. But no one has ever found it twice. And those who try often come back different. Is it just a story? A shared illusion fed by suggestion? Or has the school absorbed something it can't explain? Memory so powerful, it built a room around itself. And if the 13th classroom exists, what happens if someone stays too long? Jefferson High was built in 1921, a product of red brick, iron-framed windows, and the architectural modesty of its era. Tucked between two fading maple-lined streets in northern Illinois, the building has undergone multiple renovations over the past century. Wings were added, science labs replaced, lockers modernized, but beneath the upgrades, the bones of the school remained the same. Old stairwells still lead to unused storage closets. A sealed-off boiler room still hums quietly beneath the cafeteria. And below it all, deeper than most realize, is a neglected basement level that appears on no recent map. Officially, the basement was decommissioned in the 1970s due to asbestos concerns. It's kept locked. The staff says it's empty, but ask around, especially among janitors and older alumni, and you'll hear different versions of the same story. A narrow hallway that sometimes appears behind the supply closet near the east stairwell. Faint chalk smells where there shouldn't be any. The echo of footsteps in the dark. And once, in 1987, a student named Peter Lau claimed he followed the sound of a bell no one else heard, and found himself outside a classroom he'd never seen before. He described a rusted door, a brass placard with no number. Inside, the desks were arranged perfectly. No dust. The blackboard still bore notes from an algebra, lesson dated the 17th of March, 1956. He left the room, intending to return with a teacher. But when he retraced his steps, the hallway was gone. There was only a blank wall. Peter dropped out the following year. He never spoke of the room again. Over the years, more students came forward with whispers never publicly, always in fragments each, claiming to have encountered the same room. A girl in the class of 1998 said she stumbled upon it while trying to escape a fire drill prank. A senior in 2007 found it after chasing a dropped notebook through a door that hadn't existed before. Each described the same scene, a chalkboard filled with neat, cursive, dated decades prior. A soft buzz in the fluorescent lights, though no electricity should have reached that far. And, perhaps most disturbingly, a strange weight in the air as if the room itself were holding its breath. The bell would ring once, low and muffled, though the school's intercom was silent. Some claimed the clocks in the room moved differently, minutes dragging into hours, or passing in a blink. A few swore they heard voices just beyond the door. One said they saw figures seated at the desk spale, still, staring forward as if waiting for a teacher who would never arrive. But what truly unsettled the faculty came in 2014, when a substitute teacher named Miss Radcliffe filed a complaint after being assigned to Room 13B, a room that did not appear on any schedule. She said she waited there for nearly an hour before realizing no students would arrive. Later, when she described the location, administrators dismissed it. There was no such room and no hallway where she claimed to have stood. When pressed, she couldn't find it again. She resigned the following week, whether coincidence or cover-up. Each encounter left its mark. Students withdrawn, teachers shaken, rumors swelling in the silence that followed. And the strangest part? The room never appeared to the same person twice. Those who've stepped into the 13th classroom agree on one thing. It doesn't feel abandoned. The floor, though scuffed and dull, is free of dust. The desks, mismatched in wood tone but identical in wear, are arranged with unnatural symmetry. The blackboard is always written on, never erased. Sometimes it's a math lesson, other times a poem, or the opening lines of a history lecture. But the date in the corner never changes. The 17th of March, 1956, a Friday. No one knows why. There are no personal items, no papers, backpacks, or pens. Just the classroom, itself perfectly staged, as though paused mid-lesson. The air carries a faint metallic taste. Some say it smells like old chalk. Others compare it to ozone, like the moment before a storm breaks. Most describe a feeling of being watched, though the room is always empty, or appears to be. Several accounts mention a red leather grade book on the teacher's desk. No one has been able to read each person who opened it, says the pages were either blank or written in a language they couldn't identify. One student reported that the names inside were people who never attended Jefferson, but later research showed that some of those names did belong to students who disappeared in Illinois during the 1950s. Is it a room sealed in time? A memory replaying itself? Or something far stranger, a space that records those who enter, but does not let them leave unchanged? The school has since padlocked the entire east stairwell, yet every year, someone still hears the bell ring-ons, low and distant from beneath the floor. Theories abound, but none hold firm. Skeptics suggest it's nothing more than mass suggestion, a decades-old schoolyard legend that feeds itself. They point to stress, isolation, and the strange psychology of adolescence. The mind, they say, is eager to invent patterns, and in old buildings full of dim corridors and forgotten rooms, the imagination finds fertile ground. But others aren't so quick to dismiss. Paranormal researchers have investigated Jefferson High unofficially, and while no conclusive evidence has surfaced, oddities persist. Unexplainable EMF readings in the east stairwell, temperature drops in sealed storage rooms, and static that interferes with digital recordings taken near the basement level. One former custodian claimed the hallway itself is folded, appearing only when no one expects it. It's like the building exhales, he once said, and the door shows up. Some theorists believe the classroom is a temporal echo, a place where a traumatic moment, possibly a tragedy from the 1950s, has burned itself into the fabric of space. Others go further, suggesting that the room isn't haunted in the traditional sense, but alive in its own way. A self-contained memory loop, luring the curious into something that doesn't want to be observed or escaped. There is no official investigation, no record of student disappearances tied to the room, only stories. But the stories don't fade. They circulate, and in quiet corners of Jefferson High, students still glance twice at the east stairwell. Listening for the bell, no one hears any-o except those who are about to find the door. And those who, once they do, are never quite the same again. It began with a list names, dates, and numbers scribbled in fading blue ink. Nothing remarkable at first glance. Just a forgotten notebook wedged behind the oldest row of encyclopedias in the back corner of a secondary school library in Hampshire, England. It was found by a Year 11 student looking for a quiet place to revise. He opened it, expecting math notes or half-finished homework. What he found instead felt like a dare. Entries predicting exam scores, injuries, suspensions, all accurate. All belonging to students who hadn't yet taken the tests. Some hadn't even enrolled when the notes were dated. At first, the notebook was dismissed as an elaborate prank. But as more entries were verified and more names matched outcomes, not yet possible curiosity gave way to dread. Teachers were baffled. Administrators quietly pulled it from circulation. The notebook vanished for a time. Then it came back, tucked again in a different part of the library, updated with new names, new events. A predicted fire drill that occurred 5 minutes late. A head injury during rugby that hadn't yet happened until it did. No one claimed authorship. No one was caught writing in it. Yet the predictions continued. Was it a hoax? A time capsule from the future? Or had someone, somehow, written the lives of others before they were lived? And if so, could the next name be your own? The school is ordinary enough built in the early 1960s, with pale brick walls, wide corridors, and a library that smells of old paper and fluorescent lights. Located in a quiet town on the edge of Hampshire, the institution has seen generations of students pass through its gates, none expecting anything more mysterious than a misplaced essay or a broken projector. The library sits at the center of the school's oldest wing, wedged between the science labs and the staff lounge. It's a place students frequent less each year, replaced slowly by screens and phones. But in 2019, the notebook surfaced discovered by a student named Jamie Weller, who was revising alone one Friday evening, long after the final bell had rung. He found it by accident when a hardback slipped from the shelf and revealed a thin, cloth-bound book wedged between volumes. It had no label, no barcode, and no markings on the cover. The paper inside was yellowing. The ink was ballpoint, blue, and curiously neat. Each page had columns, a date, a student name, and a single-sentence event. At the bottom of that first page was a name Jamie recognized: his friend Toby. Next to it, sprained left wrist, rugby, Tuesday. 4 days later, Toby tripped during practice. The diagnosis: left wrist sprain. Jamie returned to the notebook. On the next page, a name he didn't know. E. Murdoch. 92% chemistry mock. The 16th of January. He checked. The results came back the following week. E. Murdoch scored exactly 92%. What unsettled Jamie most was not the predictions themselves, but the dates they were written. Months, sometimes years, before the events occurred. Some were marked in 2002, some in 1994. A few went back even further, all in the same handwriting. Word of the notebook spread quickly, though no one spoke about it publicly. Students passed it around in hushed tones, flipping through its pages like a forbidden artifact. At first, the entries were benigndest scores, weather disruptions, minor injuries. But then came predictions that were harder to laugh off. One entry read, C. Patel, suspended for fighting, the 3rd of April. 2 days before that date, C. Patel was an honor student with no disciplinary record. On the 3rd of April, after lunch, he punched another student in a crowded hallway, unprovoked, confused, and unable to explain what had triggered him. Another entry. J. Dunmore, fractured ankle, assembly stairs, May 11. The girl had never used those stairs before. On May 11, a friend jokingly dared her to take the side entrance. She tripped on the final step and fell. Then, the entries began to change tone. Less neutral, more ominous. D. Kettering, choking incident, unattended. The 19th of March. It happened. A lunchroom emergency where no one reached him in time. A. Lewis, missing, the 4th of June. She was absent that day. Police found her 24 hours later in a nearby park, unharmed but deeply shaken. She refused to speak about where she'd been. The notebook's pages always seemed to turn ahead of time. Events were listed days, sometimes weeks before they occurred. Jamie began to check for his name obsessively when he found it. It was written faintly at the bottom of a nearly full page. J. Weller, library, alone, May 27. It was May 26. He didn't go to school the next day. When he returned on May 28, the notebook was gone. The notebook was modest, in appearance faded brown cloth cover. No title, no markings. It bore the wear of decades. Fraying corners, smudged edges, faint coffee stains near the back. It looked like the kind of thing teachers might have discarded years ago, buried under years of filing and forgotten policies. But inside, the pages told a different story. The handwriting was consistent, neat, narrow, almost mechanical, unwavering in style, from the earliest entries to the most recent. There were no crossed out lines, no signs of hesitation. Each entry was dated, each prediction short, clinical, and disturbingly precise. Names, events, and outcomes never more than a sentence, but always enough. Students who examined it described a strange sensation when reading their own names, a tightening in the chest or a coldness in the fingertips. Others said the ink seemed darker the longer you stared at it. Some pages carried impressions, as if a pen had pressed too hard, suggesting the same hand wrote all of it, over decades. Curiously, the notebook never named teachers, only students, and there were gaps pages missing, some torn. One student claimed they found their name written in red, not blue, but by the time they returned with someone else, the ink had changed. Another said their page had an entry, then vanished entirely when they looked again. If anyone tried to write in it, the pen refused to leave a marcus if the notebook itself decided what it would contain and when. It never stayed in one place. After being locked in the librarian's drawer, it reappeared weeks later in the canteen behind a microwave. Once, it was found in a locker no one claimed. No one ever saw anyone carrying it. It simply arrived. And then, just as quickly, disappeared again. Theories, as always, depend on who you ask. Skeptics lean toward prank or projection in elaborate student hoax designed to exploit the power of suggestion. They claim that in a closed environment like a school, it's easy to find patterns, easy to make vague predictions feel personal. A sprained ankle, a failed exam, commonplace things dressed in mystery. But those who saw the notebook up close don't describe vagueness, they describe precision. Paranormal theorists argue the notebook is a form of retrocausal evidence of time folding backward through a medium. The fact that its entries span decades in a single hand suggests either a non-linear author or none at all. Perhaps, they say, the notebook doesn't record the future. Perhaps it shapes it. That to be written in the book is to be set into motion. Others whisper of something darker, that it feeds on visibility, that it exists to be found, and that the more it's read, the more real its predictions become. One student, who claimed to see their name written with no date attached, began to avoid the library entirely. They dropped out the following year. No one has heard from them since. The notebook has not been officially acknowledged by the school. No photos exist, at least not publicly. And yet, every few years, A new generation of students begins to talk. A rediscovery. A fresh list. The pattern restarts. No one knows who wrote the first entry. No one knows who writes them now. But if the notebook appears again, and your name is inside it, would you read the next line? Or close the book and walk away? In every school, the day is measured by bell morning, lunch, class changes, dismissal. Their rhythm shapes the lives within. But what happens when the bell rings and no one is supposed to hear it? At a small elementary school on the outskirts of Nagano Prefecture, Japan, students and staff once told a story, whispered behind closed doors, that every year, on the first Thursday of March, a bell rings exactly at 6 p.m., long after the building has emptied, long after the electricity is shut off. The sound is faint but unmistakable. A long, low chime clear, mechanical, and out of place in the gathering dark. It is said to echo from the third floor, where only classrooms sit vacant and untouched. And always, it is the sixth bell. No more, no less. 12 years ago, a boy stayed behind to investigate. He had heard the rumors, laughed at the stories, and wanted to see it for himself. He never made it home. Security cameras showed him walking up the stairwell, but he never came down. His body was never found. Since then, every year, on that same day, the sixth bell rings again. Some believe it's a malfunction. Others think it's a warning, but no one stays after sunset anymore. The school itself is unremarkable concrete structure built in the early 1970s with faded cream walls and wide corridors lined with student artwork. It sits at the edge of a forested district just outside Nagano, where winters are long and the light fades early. The building has 3 floors, with the third rarely used except during overflow years. By the mid-2000s, enrollment had dropped. Most classes were consolidated on the first 2 levels. The third floor stood silent, its rooms gathering dust, its hallway lights rarely switched on. It was March of 2011 when the incident occurred. A fifth-year student named Kenta Hoshino stayed late to retrieve a forgotten notebook. He was last seen speaking to a janitor outside the second floor landing around 5:45 p.m. Security footage, though grainy, confirmed his movements. He ascended the final stairwell at 5:52. At 6 o'clock sharp, the bell rang. 6 tones, slow and distant, despite no power feeding the system. When teachers arrived the next morning, the lights in room 3C were on. But Kenta was gone. His belongings were found inside school bag, neatly placed. Notebook on the desk, untouched lunch in the corner. No signs of struggle, no forced entry. Windows locked from the inside. Police searched the school for weeks. Nothing. No witnesses, no leads. The third floor was closed after that, officially due to structural instability. But among staff, the explanation was simpler. No one wanted to be there after sunset. Not anymore. Since then, the 3rd of March has passed quietly each year until dusk. At exactly 6 p.m., the bell rings. Always 6 times. Never 5, never 7, just 6. No one knows where the sound comes from, and no one dares check. In the years following Kenta Hoshino's disappearance, the school remained quiet, outwardly unchanged. The 3rd floor was locked, the stairwell sealed with a rusted chain, and a printed warning about structural repairs. But those who worked there knew it was something else. They spoke less of what had happened, and more of what hadn't stopped. The 6th bell continued. Always at 6 p.m., always on the same date. Faculty members tried to investigate early on. In 2013, the vice principal stayed behind with a maintenance worker, determined to prove it was an old intercom glitch. They waited in silence on the 2nd floor, Flashlights off, radios muted. When the first chime rang out, the sound echoed downward, not from speakers, but from the stairwell above. The maintenance worker fled immediately. The vice principal climbed one flight and stopped. He later said the air had changed thicker, charged. A strange cold pressed against his chest. He called it dead air, like the silence in a room after a scream. He never made it to the third floor. He resigned weeks later, citing health concerns. When pressed, he gave one final warning. That bell isn't calling us. It's marking something, like a clock that only rings when something's missing. In 2017, a curious group of seniors placed a phone on the third floor, recording through the afternoon. The footage captured nothing until exactly 6 o'clock. The camera lens warped, lights flickered, and a single frame appeared that no one could explain. It showed the classroom door half open, with a boy's silhouette standing just inside. Small, still, facing the hallway. Then blackness. The phone was found the next day, battery full, screen intact, placed carefully on the first floor reception desk. None of the students claimed responsibility. The school bell was disconnected in 2005, replaced by a digital chime system tied to the intercom grid. That grid, according to maintenance logs, has been powered down every the 3rd of March since 2012. Yet still, the 6th bell rings. It's not heard throughout the school. Only those on or near the 2nd and 3rd floors ever report hearing it. The sound is not deafening, it's faint, oddly distant, as though it were echoing across water. There is no clear direction, no origin point. It vibrates in the walls, travels through the floor, fades before the mind can trace it. But everyone agrees on one detail. It is not a modern sound, not digital, not mechanical. It is old, like the toll of a cast iron bell hung in a chapel long forgotten. Some believe the bell was never a real one-knot part of the school's infrastructure, but something older tied to the land. Others suspect it once hung in the building, perhaps during early construction, and was simply covered up when blueprints changed. Yet no records confirm this. No one recalls a 6th bell. And yet, when staff attempted to seal room 3C permanently in 2016, a local contractor reported his tools kept shorting out near the door frame. Metal screws twisted, levels wouldn't settle. The job was never completed. Today, the door to room 3C remains closed but not sealed. The knob turns, but no one opens it. Students avoid the 3rd floor windows on the 3rd of March. Teachers excuse early. And each year, when the 6th bell chimes, the air grows colder for a moment, and the building seems to pause just long enough for everyone inside to feel that something or someone is being counted. Theories surrounding the 6th bell are many, but none offer closure. Some say the sound is a psychic echo hat. Japanese folklore calls a yurei no hibikiya, haunting not of a person, but of time itself. That the moment Kenta Hoshino disappeared, something in the building fractured, and the bell is that break replaying over and over, like a wound that never closed. Others believe it marks a ritual. 6 chimes, 6 steps, 6 seconds between each toll. They note that the 3rd of March is Hinamatsuri in Japan Girls' Day, a celebration meant to ward off bad spirits and protect children. Perhaps the bell is a warning, or worse, an invitation. More skeptical voices argue that the phenomenon is mass suggestion, intensified by grief and repetition. The human mind, they say, fills silence with meaning, especially in a place as emotionally charged as a school. But even they struggle to explain the footage from 2017, or the contractors who won't return, or the files related to Room 3C that vanished from school archives in 2019. There are quieter stories, too, of parents receiving brief, muffled voicemails from school, numbers calls they never heard ring, of teachers who wake at 6 p.m. on the 3rd of March with no memory of sleeping, of a librarian who once swore she saw a boy standing outside room 3C just before sunset, then vanished down a hall that ends in a wall. None of these accounts appear in official reports, but everyone at the school knows what happens every year. And when the sun begins to fall on the 3rd of March, no one lingers near the stairwell. Not because they expect to hear the bell, but because they know they will. In most dormitories, the strange sounds you hear at night can be blamed on plumbing, old wood, or restless students. But in Dormitory B, at a quiet university in Romania, the noises aren't what disturb people. It's the time. Clocks run backward. Phones display incorrect dates, sometimes years off. Emails vanish after being sent. Students report missing hours, repeating moments, or the unnerving sensation that they've already lived a conversation that hasn't happened yet. At first, these were passed off as pranks or stress-induced hallucinations. But then came the incident in room 212. 2 roommates claimed to witness themselves walk into the room seconds before they actually did. Later that night, one of them went missing for 3 hours. When he returned, he was soaking wet, barefoot, and shivering. He remembered only one thing: a corridor full of static, and his own voice whispering from the end of it. The administration dismissed the case quietly, citing exhaustion and overwork. But rumors persisted. Whispers of students entering the communal showers only to find themselves back in their rooms. Of footsteps pacing outside, locked doors always in reverse. Of alarms ringing at impossible hours, precisely 13 seconds apart. What is happening inside Dormitory B? A fault in architecture? A fault in memory? Or has time itself fractured and begun to leak? Dormitory B is part of an aging university complex on the outskirts of Cluj-Napoca, Romania. Built in the 1960s during the Soviet-backed expansion of the region's technical institutes, the building was utilitarian concrete, narrow stairwells, and a symmetrical design meant for efficiency, not comfort. It stands 3 stories tall, with long hallways that echo too easily, and fluorescent lights that flicker even when new. Most students don't choose to live there, they're assigned. The oddities began quietly glitches, easy to dismiss. In 2009, a student reported waking each morning to find her phone alarm moved backward by 5 minutes. No matter how she reset it, the phone reverted. She replaced the device. The new one did the same. Others experienced similar anomalies. Clocks that lost or gained time without explanation. Lights turning on before switches were touched. Heating units clicking off exactly 13 seconds after being activated. Then came the anomalies that weren't so easy to ignore. A group of students in 2014 attempted to time their walk from the 3rd floor to the lobby using synchronized stopwatches. The readings varied by minutes. Later, they filmed the descent, and in the footage, one of them appeared to exit the stairwell twice. The second time, no one remembered him going back up. Administrative response was quiet but firm. An internal memo recommended a full electrical overhaul of Dormitory B, citing inconsistent grounding and residual magnetic interference. The project was never completed. Behind closed doors, some staff members admitted the structure had been built over a Cold War-era bunker, possibly an abandoned research site used by Soviet engineers. Others say no such site ever existed, but the blueprints for the building's foundation are missing. And the original architect died before the dorm opened in a car crash during a test drive he wasn't scheduled to take. The turning point came in the winter of 2017, when 3 students from the physics faculty began to document the dorm's strange behavior as part of a private research project. They lived on the 2nd floor, room 208, a room that had already been associated with rumors. Misplaced items reappearing in reversed positions, dreams that overlapped between roommates, and alarm clocks that rang even when unplugged. The students began keeping a strict time, log tracking events, behaviors, and environmental data. Their goal was to map the so-called slippage. For a while, things remained harmless. The anomalies were small: watches desynchronizing, pages of their notebooks going missing, text messages appearing out of order. But then came the 2nd week. One of them, Vlad reported seeing his roommate brushing his teeth in the shared bathroom. Nothing unusual until he returned to their room and found the same roommate still asleep, mouth closed, blanket untouched. Vlad checked the bathroom. Empty. That night, they set up motion-activated cameras in the hallway. The footage caught someone walking down the corridor at 3:33 a.m., a figure that looked exactly like Vlad, wearing the same clothes he had laid out for the next day. He never left the room that night. He swore it. The next morning, all 3 of them woke up at exactly the same time, 5:06 a.m., with no memory of going to sleep. The hallway camera was missing. In its place was a shoebox containing 3 wristwatches, all stopped at 3:33. The air in the room smelled faintly of ozone. Shortly after, one of the students dropped out and left the country. Another refused to speak to anyone about what had happened. Vlad attempted to submit a written report to a visiting physics professor from Bucharest. The professor never received it. The report was later found, unsigned, tucked between 2 floor tiles in the main stairwell, its pages bent as if folded into themselves. There is no single object responsible, no cursed mirror, no ancient artifact. In Dormitory B, it is the space itself that behaves strangely, as though the air inside is misaligned with the world around it. Students describe the building as feeling off, not haunted, but skewed. Doorways don't sit flush. The light in the main hallway pulses every 108 seconds, regardless of maintenance. Shadows fall in directions inconsistent with the window placement. But the most disturbing reports center around mirrored space rooms that seem to echo themselves at specific times. One resident claimed that at exactly 2:14 a.m., her entire room appeared reversed. Books were on the wrong shelf. The plug sockets switched sides. Even the text on her laptop screen had flipped. She blinked, and it was gone. Others describe pre-responses, hearing a knock before anyone knocks, seeing a person's reflection moments before they enter the room. A maintenance worker once attempted to diagram the hallway wiring. According to his rough sketch, a breaker box that fed electricity to the east wing also powered a non-existent circuit labeled level -1. No such level exists. The dorm has no basement. One room in particular, room 213, was quietly closed in 2020. Its last occupanta, postgraduate student in architecture, had begun mapping the dorm's internal measurements and claimed the floor plan changed each night. He reported waking up at slightly different angles, as if the room had rotated subtly during sleep. His final journal entry, scrawled in a trembling hand, read only, "There's a corridor behind the wall. I saw myself walk in, but I haven't walked out yet." The room was sealed without announcement. No explanation was given. To this day, students avoid passing it alone. Those who study the case divide into camps. Some theorize Dormitory B sits at a temporal fault linea place where time behaves irregularly, folding back on itself or drifting out of sequence. They compare it to the thin places of Celtic folklore, where reality weakens and the past, present, and future can bleed together. The sightings of duplicate selves, reversed rooms, and lost hours, they argue, are symptoms of temporal displacement, localized, unstable, but very real. Others believe the explanation lies in Cold War history. Declassified Soviet documents reference a research outpost near Cluj-Napoca during the 1970s, allegedly focused on electromagnetic field manipulation. No official link to the university has ever been found, but the construction period overlaps. The idea is that Dormitory B may have been built over, or even with, remnants of an abandoned experiment wiring or shielding still active in ways no one understands. Psychologists offer a more grounded view. Dormitory B is a pressure chamber. Isolation, poor lighting, and architectural monotony may trigger shared hallucinations, sleep paralysis, or derealization. In this interpretation, students aren't experiencing a temporal anomaly. They're experiencing their minds breaking under pressure. But that theory doesn't explain the altered objects, the cameras that disappear, or the reports that reappear years later, stained with moisture and time-warped ink. The building remains open. Students still live there. Most report nothing unusual. But now and then, someone files a strange complaint. A call that came before the phone rang. A knock that happened after the door opened. Or a moment when they swear they left their room, only to find themselves already inside. And, on rare nights, if you sit alone in the corridor and watch closely, you might see someone walking toward you, someone who looks just like you moving backwards and smiling. Every school has teachers who vanish from memory substitutes who appeared for a week, maybe 2, and were never seen again. But at St. Agatha High School in upstate New York, the opposite happened. In the autumn of 1991, a substitute named Mr. Harrow arrived to teach a literature class. He was polite, punctual, and slightly old-fashioned tweed coat, leather satchel, fountain pen. Students found him strange, but harmless. He quoted obscure poets. He spoke as if the world outside had slowed down. When asked how long he'd be there, he only smiled and said, "As long as I'm needed." The school never filed paperwork for his contract. He never appeared on payroll. When questioned, no department claimed to have hired him, but no one stopped him either. He simply showed up each morning, entered the same classroom, and taught. Years passed. The school changed. Principals came and went. Students graduated and forgot. But every few years, someone would spot him. Again, same room, same coat, same voice. He hadn't aged. Hay hadn't left. When staff finally investigated, they found the classroom empty, but the blackboard still bore his handwriting. To this day, students report seeing a tall man in a brown coat pacing the hall outside room 6C. He never speaks. He never enters. But when you pass too close, you might hear something under his breath. A poem. One you haven't read yet, but will. St. Agatha High School is nestled in a wooded stretch between 2 small towns in upstate New York. Built in the 1940s, the building has the look of every other institutional structure of the air-along brick corridors, tall windows, and a clock above the main entrance that no longer ticks. The school has undergone expansions. Yes, new labs, modernized libraries, but the original East Wing remains nearly untouched. It's there, tucked behind an old science prep room, that you'll find room 6C. Or rather, might find it. The room doesn't appear on any recent floor plans. Officially, the wing ends at room 6B, yet students have long whispered of a 6th door sometimes visible. Sometimes not just past a narrow bend where the hall's overhead lights flicker too often. Teachers rarely mention it. Maintenance avoids the area, but ask the right janitor or a student who stayed too late, and they'll tell you the same thing. Don't go near the last door, not when it's open. The earliest mention of Mr. Harrow appears in a 1991 yearbook. A single blurry photo in the background of a candid shot. No caption, no staff listing. But former students from that year recall a soft-spoken man who taught poetry with strange precisionable to recite full pages from memory, often quoting lines that wouldn't appear on the curriculum for years. When the school tried to verify his identity in 1997, no social security record could be found, no state license, no address. The HR office dismissed it as poor archiving, but when they checked the original classroom key box, one tag was missing: room 6C. Strange stories began to surface in quiet, scattered fragments. In 2003, a sophomore named Alyssa Chang was late to her first period class. She claimed she'd gotten lost trying to find the counseling office and accidentally opened the door to room 6C. Inside, she saw a man in a brown coat writing on the blackboard. He turned, smiled, and said, "You're early." She apologized, backed out, and continued on. Later, she asked her teacher about the room, only to be told it had been locked for decades. Her parents filed a formal concern after she woke up 3 nights in a row reciting lines of poetry she hadn't studied. The final verse she whispered before falling silent: "When you return, I'll still be waiting. When you forget, I'll still be known." In 2011, a guidance counselor doing a facilities audit swore he heard typing from room 6C. Curious, he entered and found an old typewriter on a wooden desk. No one was in the room, but a single sheet sat rolled into the platen. It read, "To teach is to repeat the memory of a mind that hasn't existed yet." When he returned hours later with the assistant principal, the typewriter was gone. In its place was a broken student, desk splintered at the leg and coated in dust. The most disturbing account came in 2019, when a group of seniors, curious about the legend, recorded a TikTok challenge: "Knock on room 6C at 6:06 p.m. They laughed, posted the video, and left. That night, one of them received a handwritten letter on aged paper, slid under their door. No stamp, no return address. It contained only a line: "Be careful with doors, some don't close behind you." He dropped out before graduation. His parents declined to speak with the school. Room 6C, when it can be found, does not appear abandoned. It feels paused. The walls are lined with aging bookshelves, filled with volumes no longer printed poetry, anthologies, literary criticism, faded editions of Keats, Donne, and Yeats. Their margins marked in ink so fine it seems etched. The desks are wooden, not plastic, arranged in straight rows. The windows are sealed. The lights hum, but no wiring connects them to the school's electrical map. The blackboard is always half-written. Lessons seem to start mid-thought. And what does the line remember, if not the hand that wrote it? Or, history repeats, only when we refuse to listen. One custodian who entered the room in 2007 during a late-night inspection claimed the chalk was still warm to the touch. But the most curious object is the desk at the front, a tall wooden teacher's desk, polished, oddly untouched by dust. In the center drawer, when it can be opened, is a small collection of personal items: an empty inkwell, a silver whistle, a glass lens in a cracked frame, and most notably, a leather-bound notebook. The notebook contains no name, only lines of poetry written in long, looping script, many of which appear to be original. Some are beautiful, some are grim. One entry reads, "I do not teach the living, only those who haven't woken yet." On the final page, the script changes. A different hand. Messier, rushed. It reads, "If you find this room, leave before the bell. He doesn't like when they stay." No bell has ever been installed in that part of the school, but several students have reported hearing it ring faintly at 6:13 p.m. Theories about Mr. Harrow vary wildly, none offering certainty. Some students insist he was Riala long-retired educator whose presence lingers through force of habit or unfinished duty. They point to consistent descriptions across decades, the same voice, the same clothing, the same curious expressions that suggest he already knows what you're about to ask. Others believe he is a fabrication and urban legend born from the natural eeriness of an aging school. They claim memory is a flawed tool, and once a rumor takes hold, the mind can shape coincidence into narrative. But even the skeptics struggle to explain the paper notes, the inked pages, the identical handwriting in notebooks from students who never met. A darker theory suggests Mr. Harrow isn't a ghost, but something else, entirely a memory of a teacher who never existed, projected into the school by the collective unconscious of generations who needed someone to fill a void. An archetype, a substitute not for a class, but for something missing. Others whisper that he was never meant to leave that room 6C, is not part of the school at all, but a fracture between spaces, and that those who enter are simply joining him. The school has never acknowledged the rumors. Room 6C remains officially unlisted, and any inquiries into Mr. Harrow are met with polite confusion. But students continue to report strange encounters, especially near twilight. A figure walking alone past empty lockers. A man whose reflection appears in classroom windows, but never in the hall. And once, in 2022, a new teacher accidentally wandered into the wrong room during orientation. He found a classroom full of students, silent and still, all facing forward. But when he blinked, the room was empty. 5 stories, 5 schools, each with their own quiet disturbance, something misplaced, something repeated, something not quite right. A classroom that vanishes when you search for it. A notebook that writes tomorrow before it arrives. A bell that rings long after everyone has gone home. A hallway where time folds in on itself. And a teacher who never signed in because he was never meant to leave. Are these coincidences, echoes of memory, stress, and suggestion? Or are they something else evidence that certain places, no matter how ordinary, can hold on to things that were never meant to stay? We often think of schools as places of structure, Tim Medibles, lessons, bells. But beneath that rhythm, there are pauses, cracks in the schedule, shadows in the routine. And in those moments, between the last class and the night janitor's keys, something waits. Not to be understood, only to be noticed. So the next time you're walking through a school corridor late at night, if you hear a bell that shouldn't ring, or find a room that wasn't there before, or see someone standing perfectly still just beyond the doorway, don't go closer. Not everything in a school wants to be found, and some things, once found, never let you go.